everybody. I'm going to read about my two favorite friends again, George and Martha. And this story right now is called The Tightrope. Have you ever walked on a tightrope or wanted to? One morning when George looked out his window, he could scarcely believe his eyes. Martha was walking a tightrope. "My stars," cried George, "I could never do that." "Why not?" said Martha. "It's tons of fun." Wow, she's having a great time. "But it's so high up," said George. "Oh, yes," said Martha. "And it's such a long way down," said George. "That's very true," said Martha. "It would be quite a fall," said George. I see what you mean," said Martha. Suddenly, Martha felt uncomfortable for some reason. She had lost all her confidence. She began to wobble. "Oh no, hold on, Martha." George realized his mistake. Now he had to do some fast talking. "Of course," he said, "anyone can see you love walking the tightrope." "Oh, yes?" said Martha. "Certainly," said George. "And if you love what you do, you'll be very good at it, too." Martha's confidence was restored. "Watch this," she said. Martha did some fancy footwork on her tightrope. Look at that. Wow. Now I want to read you one of my other favorite stories about the man who walked between the towers. And this is a real story about a man who walked on a tightrope. The man who walked between the towers. Once there were two towers side by side. They were each a quarter of a mile high, 1,340 feet, the tallest buildings in New York City. A young man saw them rise into the sky. He was a street performer. He rode a unicycle. He juggled balls and fiery torches. But most of all, he loved to walk and dance on a rope he tied between two trees. Look at that. He looked not at the towers, but at the space between them, and thought, what a wonderful place to stretch a rope, a wire on which to walk. And once the idea came to him, he knew he had to do it. He saw 3 balls he had to juggle. If he saw 2 towers, he had to walk. That's how he was. Look at that. Hadn't he danced on a wire between the steeples of Notre Dame Cathedral above his amazed home city, Paris? Why not here, between these 2 towers? Oh, he's very brave. Of course, he knew that as in Paris, the police and the owners of the towers would never allow it. "You must be crazy," they would say. "You'd fall for sure." And so Philippe, that was the young man's name, began a plan to do it secretly. The buildings are not quite finished, he thought. Maybe, just maybe, if I dressed as a construction worker. He's trying to plot a way to get up there. Early on an August evening, he and a friend entered the South Tower. They got a 440-pound reel of cable and other equipment into the elevator. They took it to the unfinished top 10 floors and waited till nightfall when everyone had gone. Then they carried everything up 180 stairs to the roof. Wow, look at that. It's a lot of hard work. At midnight on the other tower's roof, 2 more friends tied a thin, strong line to an arrow, and they shot it across to Philippe, 140 feet away. Whoops. Something happened in this book. It's in another... Sorry. It's like there was another language right here suddenly. Okay. All of a sudden, this was different than my other copy of my book. Well, when his friend shot the arrow, and that's what we said, it missed and landed on a ledge 15 feet below the roof. Bad luck, thought Philippe. He crawled down to the ledge over the sparkling city and got the arrow. And to its line, he tied a stronger line, which his friends pulled back to their tower. And to his end of the stronger line, Philippe tied the cable on which he would walk. It was 5/8 of an inch thick. Can you see how thick that is? Wow. His friends pulled the cable over to their tower, but it was so heavy that it slipped from Philippe's grip. The cable's middle plummeted toward the street, pulling the friends on the other tower to the very edge. Philippe, just in time, secured his end. Whoa, that's a little bit scary, isn't it? It took 3 hours to pull the cable back up. Frantically, as the stars faded, they tightened it between the towers. It was past dawn before they were ready. Can you see the rope there, all stretched and ready for Philippe to walk the tightrope? Philippe put back on his black shirt and tights. He picked up his 28-foot balancing pole. All his life he had worked to be here, to do this. As the rising sun lit up the towers, out he stepped onto the wire. Wow. Look at that. Look at Philippe. And then I'm going to go like this. Out to the very middle he walked as if he were walking on the air itself. Many winds whirled up from between the towers and he swayed with them. He could feel the towers breathing. He was not afraid. He felt alone and happy and absolutely free. Can you see all that? Wow, Philippe. A woman coming from the subway must have been the very first to see him. Look, someone walking on a wire between the towers. Look at that. Everyone stopped and looked up. They gasped and stared. It was astonishing. It was terrifying and beautiful. A quarter of a mile up in the sky, someone was dancing. And the police saw it too. Look at that. Incredible. Whoa, I can't believe someone would be so brave. Officers rushed to the roofs of the towers. You're under arrest, they shouted through bullhorns. Philippe turned and walked the other way. Who would come and get him? For almost an hour, back and forth, he walked, he danced, he ran, and he knelt in a salute upon the wire. He even lay down to rest. The city and the harbor spread beneath him. The sky surrounded him. Seagulls flew under and over. As long as he stayed on the wire, he was free. He is pretty brave. When he felt completely satisfied, he walked back to the roof and held out his wrists for the handcuffs. They brought him to court, and the judge sentenced him to perform in the park for the children of the city. So he didn't have to go to jail. This he did happily. Though this is interesting, during his performance, some boys were playing on his wire and they jerked it, and guess what happened? Philippe fell. But he caught himself. That's the good news, and he wasn't hurt. Now the towers are gone. But in memory, as if imprinted on the sky, the towers are still there. And part of that memory is the joyful morning, August 7th, 1974, when Philippe Petit walked between them in the air. And he'll never forget that day. He must be quite an older man right now. I wonder if he still walks and does things like that. Wow, that's incredible. And I'm going to read another George and Martha story to you, because that one about the tightrope reminded me of that story I love about Philippe. And this one is called The Diary. Have you ever written in a diary? I did a diary when I was young. Whenever Martha sat down to write in her diary, George was always nearby. Yes, George, said Martha. Oh, I was just on my way to the kitchen, said George. Said Martha. Right when she's starting to write, dear diary. Martha decided to finish writing outdoors. How peculiar, she said to herself. I can still smell George's cologne. Then Martha heard leaves rustling above her. Where do you think George is hiding? Aha, she cried, you were spying on me. I wanted to see what you were writing in your diary, said George. Then you should have asked my permission, said Martha. May I peek in your diary? Asked George politely. What do you think she's gonna say? I wonder. No, said Martha. I wonder if George got down from that tree safely. This one is called the Icky story. Icky. I wonder what is Icky. Ooh. At lunch, George started to tell an icky story. Martha strongly objected. Please, have some consideration, she said. But George told his icky story nevertheless. You're asking for it, said Martha. He wasn't being respectful of her, was he? When Martha finished her lunch, she told an icky story. It was so icky that George felt all queasy inside. He couldn't even eat his dessert. You're the champ, said George. Don't make me do it again, said Martha. I won't, said George. Look at George. Oh my goodness. He really was queasy. And this last story I'm going to read is called The Big Scare. Have you ever been afraid or felt scared of something? Boo! Cried George. Have mercy, screamed Martha. Martha and her stamp collection went flying. I'm sorry, said George. I was feeling wicked. Well, said Martha, now it's my turn. Go ahead, said George. Not right away, said Martha. Look at all those stamps just flying everywhere. Suddenly, George found it very difficult to concentrate on what he was doing. Oh, any minute now, Martha is going to scare the pants off me, he said to himself. He didn't know when she would scare him, did he? Maybe she's hiding someplace, he said. George made sure that Martha wasn't hiding under the sink. What a funny place that would be to hide. During the day, George got more and more nervous. Oh, any minute now, he said. She's going to scare me. I just know it. Poor George. But Martha was relaxing in her hammock. I'm sorry I forgot to scare you, said Martha. Oh, that's all right, said George. It wouldn't have worked anyway. I'm not easily frightened. I know, said Martha. And do you think that George was telling the truth? I'm not so sure that he was. But anyway, I want to say goodbye and good night to, there's Amron and hi, Logan. I hear that you've been watching my stories, and Garrett and Brielle. I'm just so happy that all of you are listening to my stories, and I want to send you all a lot of kisses. Mwah, 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 mwah. Did you catch them all? Oh, looks like you missed it. Here, let me throw one more last one for everyone to catch. Mwah. Okay, good night, everyone. Bye-bye, and keep reading and listening to stories.
Amen.